today. But Mike, we're starting with Joe Burrow. To James's chagrin, to his discontent, we didn't talk enough about Joe Burrow yesterday, and he's right. Joe Burrow is still the engine that makes this team go. He's not necessarily played a perfect game against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but in the clutch, some of the biggest plays in this game came from Joe Burrow's legs and his rushing ability and his general pocket management. What did you see when you saw Burrow dealing with a high degree of pressure and this time taking one sack instead of the 9 that he took against the Titans?
Everybody's all talking about the play from Chris with Burrow and Chris Jones, where he escapes while Jones basically has him in like a headlock, and then Jones dives and he lifts his feet up perfectly to escape the sack. And that was not the only time he did something like that. That was just the most exaggerated example of what he was doing the entire game, because the offensive line had issues the entire game. That wasn't the only time Chris Jones got into the backfield. It wasn't the only time he beat Hakeem Adeniji or Jackson Carman. He was getting into the pocket, getting in Burrow's face constantly. And Burrow's just stylistically, he just reminds me so much, because I sometimes when I talk about pocket movement, I talk about Tom Brady, but Tom Brady is very much the very slight pocket mover, where it's just like a small step. I feel like with Burrow, he does that a little bit, but he does also really like to do a little bit of a big step, and then step up and run out. Tom Brady's not running, even when he sees two man, he's not really running very often. He gets like 2 of those a year. So Burrow's the type that will take that and run. And he just had such a great feel this past week for when the rush was getting there, where it was coming from. And when they played two man specifically, that against cover one, it's less useful to run because there's a linebacker or a safety that has their eyes on the quarterback nearby, and coming downhill. So against two man, though, they're all the way back 20 yards. So you've got free roam to run. And then also against match coverages as well, which just means it's zone essentially, and then it becomes man to man, and they all switch responsibilities. It's cool to watch. But anyway, long one to say that he reminds me a lot of Tony Romo stylistically with his pocket movement and his running. And I've said that for a while on my Twitter and stuff. But yeah, this game was the perfect example, because he's not just making small movements to make the throw, but he's making these big movements to make a run, to extend a play, keep the play alive for just a second. And everybody always talks about, making something happen out of nothing as a quarterback. And I mean, the perfect example was him this past week, where it felt like 40% of the pass plays or so, there was pressure. And you just don't notice it when the quarterback is as good at avoiding it as Joe Burrow.
Yeah, the one play, because you mentioned it wasn't just the 3rd and 6 play that deserves a ton of praise and got a ton of praise. The one that stood out to me, going back, was the pass to Chase, where he gets away. And Zach said it was his favorite play. He called one of his favorite plays. He was dying to call it, and it blew up in his face. Didn't work well, but Burrow made him look good, right? And made the offense look good. And that's the example. I mean, that's a huge play. I believe that was on their touchdown drive where they ultimately score and tie the game. Or no, that was the one where not where they score and tie the game. That was the field goal drive, I believe, where they cut it to a 1-score game. Either way, the fact that he was able to get Chase into a bit of a rhythm, because it wasn't like Chase was being used a ton, certainly stood out to me on rewatch is a play that not shifted momentum, but certainly made a difference outside of those runs that you mentioned.
Yeah, and that was a play that, same idea, where he could have taken off and run, but he's the type that likes to keep his eyes downfield. He likes when he's rolling out to extend a play and try to find the passing lane, because that's going to be the bigger gain. Even though Burrow's probably like I'm just going to spitball a 4.7 ish athlete. Probably he's fast enough that he'll burn you on defense. He's not. I wanted to say Matt Ryan there, but I think I've seen Matt Ryan run before, and I think he's slightly faster. I think he's not Phillip Rivers or Tom Brady or any of those guys. He's faster. He's faster than Matt Ryan. He's a good athlete. He's just not like a Lamar Jackson. He's like the next step down, where a lot of these quarterbacks are starting to come in as athletes. And that's the beauty of having a guy like that, where he has the pocket presence to avoid the rush, and then everything breaks down, and he has the athleticism to be able to run away. And like you mentioned, getting Chase involved, super important, because they were doing. I said I didn't think they're going to change much. They changed a little bit, and they were really trying to take away Jamar Chase, as we saw. And credit to Spagnuolo for doing that. And I think it messed with them a little bit in the first half. And getting him involved with by extending the play, and everything breaks down. The entire defensive plan's toast now because the play's been extended, and you get the ball to your best player. That's awesome. That's good football.
What do you think the difference is from game to game for Burrow when it comes to pressure to sack stuff? Do you think it's just a type of pressure that he's getting, where the pressure's coming from? Do you think it's something in the way he's playing? Because it seems very calculated. Maybe it's just the coverages, right? Maybe it's when teams are sitting back in zone, they have eyes on the quarterback. He's not prioritizing the running lanes as much, or thinking about escaping as much. Do you think that it's probably a combination of those things, I guess, because the Chiefs were turning their back on him a little bit more, and it sounds like they were expecting that. But what are your thoughts on what the determining factor of the difference is on the games where he's getting sacked like 40% of his pressures versus the games where he's getting sacked on 10% of his pressures?
To me, it starts with, yes, zone versus man is a big one, and match versus just straight zone, because you get the eyes on the quarterback type thing. But what I really think it is when they run creepers and stunts. And I think that just gets him because he knows the designated pass rush lanes, and he knows the general feel for guys crossing my face, I step right. But when they run a stunt, that's what they want you to do, because they have taken your tackle, and even if he passes it off perfectly, he's closer to the quarterback than he normally would be because of the slant bringing him in. And so we bring the slant brings him in. He goes to take the looper, and Burrow sees the slanter, and especially when it's the Bengals right guards who haven't been playing very well, and they let the pressure get back and right into his face, he might avoid that initial guy with a step to his right, but then that leaves open the edge where the looper is coming around. So now he's stepping into the pressure. And I think stunts a little bit get him, and they take away what I think is one of his best abilities, his pocket movement. And then I think those creepers do a little bit as well, where it's a 4-man rush, but he feels the guy coming. And I mean, the offensive line does a bad job picking those up too, because they've given up free runners in the B and A gap. That's just not something you could do. You can avoid a guy that is beating your offensive lineman like a drum, but if your offensive line's not even getting in his way, that becomes an impossible ask.